Good morning. My name's Tony. I am the lead pastor here at Gateway. Welcome for those of you that are online. If you're a guest with us, we are so glad that you're here today. We're starting a brand new series today called No Pain, No Gain. No, we're not starting a workout program. You used to see these things all over the gyms. They'd be in the gyms and they'd say, no pain, no gain. You just got to hurt or you ain't going to gain. We got talking about what we wanted to do this summer, and one of these is we don't feel like it's too late and we don't feel like it's too soon to talk about how the pandemic and how the world events and the things that's going on right now affect us. How have we grown through them? So that's kind of this idea that there's this pain that we get in living. Amen? I mean, we all, if you haven't felt the pain yet, just go fill your car up after church, all right? There's this pain of things that are out of our control, things we can't control. And there's this side of things that, and sometimes we just get caught up in the event, in the circumstance, and we complain and all that stuff. But we want to approach this with you as, how have you grown through it? How are you different? For the better or for the worse? What have you learned the last 3 years through the things that we've gone through? Pain without gain is a shame. That's kind of the gist of this series. And so it's a 3-part series. They talk about this new normal, right? We come to this side of pandemic and we're like, we just can't wait to get back to normal. And people are like, no, it's not going to go back to normal. There's this new normal. And we're still trying to define what that is. During the pandemic, we just wanted to get back to normal. We wanted our lives to go back the way they were because we liked the way they were. We were comfortable the way they were. And so we have this idea of this normal, but we're not sure exactly what the new normal is going to look like. We're still settling in, aren't we? Some of you might even still be trying to fight to get back to the way it was. And you can keep fighting, but I just don't think it's going to be normal, whatever that means. I think there is going to be kind of this new normal. Some things have been forced on us. They will be forced on us. They're out of your control. There can be no doubt, though, that life today is very different than it was 5 years ago. At least in my life. Maybe not yours, but in my life, things are different. People are different. The people that I know are different. Their circumstances are different. A wise person will pause in the middle of this pain that we've been in and ask this question: what have I learned? How am I different? How am I better for it? And that might create tension for you right now because most of us maybe not have thought that we might possibly be better for what we've gone through or what we're going through. I'll tell you what I've learned during the pandemic, and it's this. And here's a graphic that I've got for you. Does anybody know what this is? Besides the words that say up there, the war hog. Does anybody know what that is? The war rig? Has anybody seen the Mad Max movies? Oh man, I don't have time to explain the Mad Max movies to you. I remember when I was younger, I watched the first one. I probably shouldn't have, but I was young and I thought, oh, this looks cool. But the Mad Max movies are all about the apocalypse that's coming. I mean, everything is different. Everything has changed. The apocalypse has hit. And here's what I've learned is that the Mad Max movies had it wrong. When an apocalypse comes, when a pandemic hits, when things get really hard, oil, which in the Mad Max movies, they were all fighting over oil. This thing was full of oil or water or something like that. That is not the commodity that will be the most valuable thing during the apocalypse. It's going to be this: toilet paper. Right? We thought oil was the commodity to get during an apocalypse, and well, I guess maybe I'm out of date because now that the price of gas is as it is, maybe it is oil again. But toilet paper, right? I think, and I know the name has already been taken, but I really think they should redo, in the light of the pandemic, a new movie called MAXGame of Thrones. I think they ought to do that, right? I know I know that the title has been taken, but it would be a funny movie, right? So the question that I'm asking you this morning is, what have you gained through the pain? How have you grown? What is different in your life for the better? How is your life better because of what we've gone through? And that's an important question, because if we don't stop and ask that question, we will quickly move through the pain and not gain, and that will be a shame. Because God uses all things for our good, even the rough things, even the bad things. We should not rush back to the old normal. Listen to me. Let's not be in a hurry to get back to the way things were, but let's instead learn and grow into the new things that God has for us. So pain without gain would be a shame. So there's this little book that C.S. Lewis wrote it's called The Problem of Pain. And it's a really good little book. It's a neat little book. And if you ever get a chance to get it and read it, if you're going through a difficult time, if you're going through circumstances in your life and there's just a lot of pain around you and in you and through you and all that, this is a good book, because C.S. Lewis sits down and he really thinks through this theology of pain. Why we suffer, why we go through these difficult things. And he wrote this little book, The Problem of Pain. And he has this little blurb in there, and I want to kind of go through this with you really quick. It's just an amazing thing, and it really connects with what we're trying to say today. Here's what he says in the book. He says, my own experience. So he's talking about his experience in life. If you've read C.S. Lewis's life, you know that he's experienced pain and suffering and loss in his life. My own experience is something like this. So he's reflecting on his life. I'm progressing along the path of life in my ordinary, contentedly fallen and godless condition. So he's saying, my experience is this. In my godless condition, in my humanity, I'm just kind of walking through life, down the path of life. And next slide. Absorbed in the merry meeting with my friends. Now he's from England, so, for the morrow, or a bit of work that tickles my vanity. When suddenly a stab of abdomen pain that threatens serious disease. So he's saying, my experience is this. In my human condition, my natural state is just to kind of float through life, go down the path, seeking happiness, hanging out with my friends, all the good stuff I like, all the toys that I have. He says, my experiences go that when all of a sudden in the middle of my happiness, something out of the blue hits me and threatens serious disease. Next slide. Of a headline, he says, so the threat, of a headline in the newspaper that threatens us all with destruction. It sends this whole pack of cards tumbling down. This whole life that I've built around my happiness and around things going well for me. He says, when I have this serious illness or I have this headline that threatens the comfort of my life, it just sends all of that tumbling down. Next slide. At first, I'm overwhelmed. And all my little happinesses look like broken toys. He's saying, things in life have a way of crushing what you believe to be the most important things in your life. And these things that he just kind of blindlessly and thoughtlessly just go through life with, he says, when there's pain, when you start to take those things like your health away from you, or you start to take your comfort away from you, or your security, or your money, or your your ability to go down to the store and walk through without a mask, that kind of stuff. When you start to take things away from you, all of a sudden, the things that I thought were important, the things that I really built my life upon as a house of cards, because it all just starts tumbling down. Next slide. Then, he says, slowly and reluctantly, bit by bit, I try to bring myself into the frame of mind that I should be in at all times. Next slide. And perhaps, by God's grace, I succeed, and for a day or two, become a creature consciously dependent on God. When you start to take away the things that are secured, when you start to take away your money and your job and your freedoms, and you start to take away your health and all of these things and the people that I love, when you start to take away these things, all of a sudden, I realize I really need to be dependent on God. And for a day or two, I managed to get my mindset in a frame that it should always be in, but for whatever reason, the pain of the moment has turned me back to God. And now my mind is set on God, and I draw its strength from the right sources. He's saying it's the pain in life that turns us to God. It's the pain in life that makes me realize my mindset should be set upon God and the things of God, and all of these other things aren't really important. Next. But the moment the threat is withdrawn, the moment we start to go back to normal, the moment that the pain subsides, the moment that the threat is taken away from you, then, and you know what I'm talking about. Remember when your marriage hit a rough patch and you begin to make changes because you're worried about your marriage. Your marriage is rocky. There's something wrong, and you begin to make changes. You start coming home a little earlier at night. You start spending more time. Guys, you start helping out more around the house. You start doing the dishes. You start telling your wife you love her more. Wives, you start respecting your husband a little more. You start giving them the benefit of the doubt. You start lifting them up, and you start to make these little changes in your marriage. And for a moment, maybe a day or two or a week or a month, things start to actually get better. And the pain of losing your marriage begins to kind of go away, and things start to get better. What do? Slowly but surely, we begin to go back to the old ways. We begin to fall back into our patterns of unhealthy living. Maybe you're a single woman and you thought you were pregnant. It scared you to death. And you prayed and you begged God and you promised to change, and you found out that you weren't. And for a period of time you behaved, and then once the pain of the fear of an unwanted pregnancy happens, then you begin to fall back into your previous behaviors. Don't pretend like we don't know what we're talking about here. Maybe you're drinking a little too much. Some say, you're drinking too much. And you say, no, I don't. But it starts to affect your relationships, your job, your marriage. And you begin to realize that the too much alcohol is hurting your life. And you begin to drink less and make changes. But the minute that the pain subsides, we fall back into our old ways. Or maybe you got a medical scare, and the doctor warned you that if you don't make changes, you're not going to be here in 10 years. And what do? You start dieting, you start exercising, you start watching everything health-wise. And the moment that you feel better, the moment that you look better, the moment that things start to be okay, what do? We fall back. We drift back into our previous behaviors. Why do we do this? Why can't we just stay on the road? Why can't we just make the change and stick to it? Why do we do it? What's wrong with us? Why do we need to be on this brink of disaster? Why do we need to take ourselves right to the edge of disaster in our relationships, in our health, and all of the things that we worry about? Why do we have to go to the edge for something to change? He goes on. He says, my whole nature leaps back to the toys. God has had me but for 48 hours, and then only by dint, which means power or force, of taking everything else away from me. Next verse, or next slide. Let him sheathe that sword for a moment, and that's what we ask him. Take the pain away for a moment. Gain through the pain is not accidental. We all will have pain in our life. We all will suffer changes in our life. Things will be forced upon us. Things will happen to us. Health issues, relational issues, social issues, all of these things will come that will create pain and uncomfort in our life. Growth can happen through the bad times as much as it does in the good times. But growth is intentional. We have to shift our minds and our hearts not away from the pain, but toward the pain, and ask God, God, what is it that you want me to learn through this? I know that this is uncomfortable for us. It's uncomfortable for me. But I want to poke and I want to prod this morning just a little, because I really, truly want to spare you and myself and anyone that's listening, spare disaster. There are some things that we can be spared of. None of us, though, is spared from pain. And he goes on. And this is typical C.S. Lewis style. He says, and I behave like a puppy when the hated bath is over. How many of you got dogs? How many of you ever given your dog a bath? Yeah. You understand exactly where we're going here, right? Next slide. Oh, go back. Did I not have it in there? I must have missed that one. Hang on, I'll read it to you. Like a dog after his unwanted bath. He says, I shake myself as dry as I can, and I race off to reacquire my comfortable dirtiness. If not in the nearest manure heap, at least in the nearest flower bed. And he's saying about himself, this is my experience. That pain makes me change for a moment. But once the pain has gone, I don't gain from the pain. It's a shame. I want to go back to the way I was. I don't even really want to go back there. I just simply naturally drift back to that. It's in our nature. The problem with pain is that most of us let those times go to waste. We don't gain through them. We don't grow through them. We spend time instead of whining about it, complaining about it, blaming someone else for it, pretending that it's not there. Hope that whatever day this is, it will soon pass, and we just want to get back to what is normal. And I'm trying to help you today to understand, don't be so quick to want to go back to normal, but instead grow through it. So we shouldn't let good things go to waste, right? We always say that. But it's just as important that we don't let bad things go to waste either. God uses all moments of our life, all circumstances, to grow us for our good. So, during these difficult times, we want to take inventory. I want to ask you this morning to take inventory of your life. Take inventory of what you're going through right now. I know that we're scared. We're looking on the brink of financial recession. I know the gas prices are through. People are worried about their jobs. People are worried about their businesses. I understand that. I know some people are still worried about COVID and the effects of that and catching that. and because you have health issues. I understand those things. I understand all the stuff that's going on politically in our world, and we try to blame and point our fingers and all that stuff. But here's the bottom line. God doesn't want us to do that. God wants us to look at everything that's going on and say, okay, I need to take inventory of my life, and I need to ask these very important questions. What have I been doing? What have I been doing that almost led to my undoing? What have you been doing in your life? What are your habits? How are your habits? Where are they leading you? What are the things that you're doing that's almost led to your undoing? And here's another question that's just as important. What should I begin doing that I should have been doing all along? These are some important questions. So I want to talk real quick, and I want to jump in to just 3 quick areas of our life that I think will bring all of this home for us. And the first one is this. How can I gain through the pain financially? How can I gain through the pain financially? We have all been doing pretty much, what have you been doing that almost led to your undoing financially? What have been your financial habits pre-pandemic, during the pandemic, before you lost your job, or before inflation went to 10%? What have been your financial habits before that? What have you been doing that's almost led to your undoing? Or possibly it has led to your undoing. What do you wish that you'd been doing financially? There's 2 financial realities that we all must learn. And the first one is this. What I want is better than what I owe. What I want is much better than what I owe. See, what do you mean by that? Well, it's okay to go without stuff you don't need than it is to owe for stuff that you don't need. Does that make sense? You're quiet. Am I poking too hard? Prodding too hard? It's at me too. It's amazing how during uncertain financial times we tend to sharpen our pencils personally. It's amazing when we are looking down the barrel of recession and all of that we begin to really take seriously what we're spending our money on, how we're spending our money. The question is, are you saving more than you're spending? But the minute the recession is over, the minute the crisis is averted, we go back to our old behaviors financially. A financial hole is due in part to the lack of self-control. When there's a crisis financially, do you ever think to yourself, boy, I wish I had more money in the bank? When you've lost your job, if you're living paycheck to paycheck, what does that mean if you lose your job? That means you're one paycheck away from not paying your bills. Say, why are you getting so personal financially? Because I care about you, and I care about me, and I care about that the people of God are planning. You say, well, how's that work? Well, look at the life of Joseph. Did you know the entire world faced a famine? The entire world. But Egypt survived. Why? Because Joseph had the forethought to obey God and begin ahead of time making sure that there was reserves when the crisis hit. And so when the crisis hit, the world was starving and Egypt was handing out food. God doesn't want his people starving. He wants his people to be able to help in times of need. But you can't help and I can't help if when we go through this crisis that we're not able to give. And we can't give because we've lived too close with no margin. Right now, gas is 2 times it was 2 years ago. Inflation at 10%. The times are uncertain, but maybe you're thinking, I wish I'd saved more. Now that you're paying twice as much for some things, maybe now you're thinking, I wish I'd saved more. Well, it's never too late to start. The proverb says this, Proverbs 25:28. A person without self-control is like a city with broken down walls. Security, peace, prosperity. These are the things that the walls of their time represented. And when they are broken down, the people then are unsafe. They're unsafe. There's no peace. There's no prosperity. A lack of self-control leads to a loss of control. How can I gain through the pain financially? It's this, simple. Begin to save more. Begin to build up that nest egg so that when the crisis comes, you won't be looking for a handout, but instead you'll be the person of God who steps up to help your neighbor or to help someone in need. Spend less. Get out and stay out of debt. I know it seems practical, it seems simple, but listen, in times when things get tough, it's always our money we worry about the most. So if this season is hitting you hard, don't blame the pandemic. Don't blame Joe Biden, please. Don't blame your boss. Don't blame the economy, because here's the truth. And those of you that have lived as long as I have and longer, you know this. And young people, just get ready for it. There are times in your life when things are good, and there are always times in our lives when things go down. And that is just the nature of finances in our culture, in our country. So you save, you put back, you plan, you prepare, so that when you're going down, you don't go down. But you're able to help and be the people of God. Take inventory. Take responsibility for your finances. Decide today that you're going to gain through the pain. That you're going to, and here's the deal. If you didn't do that and you've suffered and you're suffering, listen, learn your lesson. That's the point of this. Learn your lesson. Let the pandemic, let the downtimes, let the recession, let the $5 gas, let all of that teach us a lesson that we need to prepare and be ready for when crisis comes and pain comes into our life. So the second thing is this: how can I gain through the pain relationally? The first one's finances. The second one is relationally. And I think in the only pandemic I know in my lifetime, the pandemic, we've learned this lesson, didn't we? That relationships are important. And there are things that we learned about our relationships through the pandemic that shocked us. Maybe we learned that wow, I wasn't as close. You know, look, you take an entire family, a mom, dad, and kids, especially little kids, and you lock them in a house for 2 weeks. You're going to learn a lot of stuff about yourself. You're going to learn a lot of stuff about your husband and your wife. You're going to learn a lot of stuff about how you are, it's easy when things just kind of get fractured and stuff to just go to work and come back and get into that routine. But when you actually have to start spending time with each other, and the pandemic taught us that, didn't it? What has been your experience relationally during these hard times? How do you see yourself differently relationally through the pandemic? Relationally speaking, the last couple of years has taught me this big lesson, is that community is priceless. When we couldn't meet, when we had to stop gathering, for me personally, this is something that just charges my soul, to be around you, to be near you, to be and see people loving one another and hugging one another and just being in community and having conversations and talking. We learned through the pandemic that we are created to be relational beings, and that relationships are valuable and important. But when we didn't gather, it said everything. Maybe you discovered there were hidden cracks in your marriage or hidden cracks in a friendship. Maybe you discovered the lack of common ground that you had with your kids. You thought you were closer to your kids until you spent 2 weeks with them nonstop. If we get this right, if we learn through the pain, if we gain through the pain, instead of looking back and seeing how we were fractured and our relationships hurt and how we were made different and all of this stuff, we might possibly change the story and say, the the pandemic was awful, but it was the catalyst that saved my marriage. If we can learn through these painful moments, we can look back and say, that financial time or that pandemic was the catalyst that saved my relationship with my kids. That it made me look more at the relationships and the value of them. Maybe you realize that maybe you neglected and ignored an elderly family member too much. And when you couldn't see them, you realized just how much you really want to be around them. How much you want to spend time with them. And when you couldn't, it broke your heart. That's gaining through the pain of loss of relationships. Some people haven't gained through the pain. I don't know about you, but the world just seems like it's a whole lot less kinder than it used to be. People are angry. People are upset. Their worlds have been shaken up. Their normal is gone, and they just want to get back to their normal, but the normal's not coming, and it just makes them angry, and they're yelling at one another. And now you go to the restaurants and the stores, and they're actually putting signs up now that say, if you yell at our employees, you will not be served. Why did they have to put that up? Because people are yelling at them. They're screaming at them. They're just upset. They're angry. The world seems a lot less patient and graceful and merciful toward one another. How have you gained relationally? And lastly, how have you gained personally? How have you gained personally? I want to look at Job chapter 1, verse 21. Job says this, I came naked from my mother's womb, and I will be naked when I leave. The Lord gave me what I had, and the Lord has taken it away. Praise the name of the Lord. Painful experiences will turn us toward God. Maybe you're here and you're thinking, I didn't used to pray that much, but maybe during the pandemic, or maybe now that you're facing with financial issues, maybe now something really painful has happened, and for the first time in your life, you're on your knees praying to God. Or maybe for the first time in a very, very long time, you're on your knees and you're praying to God, because painful experiences will turn us toward God. It takes us to our knees. Maybe you've started reading the Bible. Maybe you don't own a Bible and you went and bought one because you want to read it. Maybe you turned to Revelation to see, hey, is this the real apocalypse? Is this really the end? Is this going to be all she wrote? Because you hear all this stuff about the pandemic and it's the end and all of this stuff. Maybe this stuff has stirred something in you spiritually and it's turning you toward God. And you want to get back into church, or you wanted to start going to church and you're starting to look. Maybe that's you. Because painful moments tend to turn us toward God. But painful moments also can turn us away from God. For the religious person, when crisis happens, it shakes your worldview. When something hard happens in your life and painful, you start asking questions that maybe you've never had to ask before. Maybe you've never asked, and your faith is rattled. Your view of God is rattled. And you begin to ask these questions. Where's God in this? How could God let this happen? I thought God loved us. I thought God was a better God than this. Why is this thing happening? Why am I going through this? Why did I lose my job? Why is my marriage all messed up? Why is my relationships hurting? Why is my finances so painful? Why is a pandemic allowed to even run free in the world? How could God let that happen? So pain tends to turn us toward God, and for those of us that have a relationship with God, sometimes it causes us to question God. Here's what I want to say about all of that. Pay attention to the tension. Pay attention to that tension. Maybe you're questioning yourself because you're questioning God. It's okay. Because maybe if you'll stay in that, maybe if you'll embrace the pain, and you'll embrace the circumstance, maybe, just maybe, you might come out of that better than when you went into the pain. Stronger, more mature, a better worldview, a better view of God. Kate Bowler said this. Kate Bowler is a professor at Duke Divinity School, wrote a book, and I'll share that here in a second. But she said this: there's a little prosperity gospel in all of us. You say, okay, you're going to have to explain that to me. What do you mean there's a little prosperity gospel? It's this. We all tend to think that we're entitled to something, that maybe it's God or karma or whatever, but I'm a good person. I live a good life. Therefore, good things should happen to me. And when bad things happen, we get all rattled and what's wrong with me? What am I doing wrong? And that is prosperity gospel. If you think that your life is going to go smooth and wonderful and blessed, however we use the word blessed, because you trust God, listen to me. Ask every one of the apostles if they felt blessed when they gave their life up for the gospel. If you think that your life just deserves something good and special because you serve God, listen to me, you have a prosperity gospel mentality. As a matter of fact, trusting and serving and giving your life to God might actually cost you everything. It may not bring you anything of this world's value, but it may cost you everything. It may even cost you your life. Most of us think God or life or karma owes us and we're entitled. Kate Bowler is a professor, and she wrote this book, and this is the book. The book is entitled, Everything Happens for a Reason and Other Lies I've Loved. Listen to me, Christians. Stop telling people everything happens for a reason, because here's the truth. Sometimes there's no reason for it. There's no reason the pain happened, but here's something that is true. That you can gain through it. That God can bring you through it stronger, more mature, more like Him, trusting Him more. She went on and she wrote this to a pastor who quoted what she said. It says this: each of us, through the accidental narcissism of wanting to be happy, gets confused about what we deserve. The world can't help us know the difference between who is righteous and who is just plain lucky. You ever wonder why bad things happen to good people and good things happen to bad people? And you try to sort that out theologically? What we're saying here is you can't. Just because you're in pain, just because you're suffering, just because bad things are happening to you, doesn't mean that you're not righteous. It doesn't mean that God's not for you, that God's against you. And just because things are going really well in your life doesn't mean that you're just blessed above everybody else because you must love God more than me. That's not true. And she's saying you can't possibly look at the world and how we judge happiness and say, oh, they're righteous. Oh, they're not righteous. It doesn't work that way. The point is this: we need to live our life like Job. He learned that the goal in life isn't to be happy. Because things come and things go. I came into this world naked, and I'm going to leave this world naked. I can't take any of it with me. But this is the thing that's important. Things come, things go. It's not important that I'm happy. What's important is this: that I'm able to praise God in all of it. In the good times and in the bad. Pain without gain is a shame. Let's face and embrace the pain of the seasons that we go through. Let's look at them not as they're wrecking my normal life, but let's look at these things as opportunities. God, what do you want to teach me through this? Let's decide that we will be different because we need to be different. Let's not behave like little puppies who are just getting over the hated bath and run back to our normal ways. Don't race off to the old normal. Don't race off to the nearest manure heap. Can you imagine? Just imagine with me for a moment. If everybody in the world could see times like a pandemic or a recession or a change that's painful in our life or a loss, if they could see all things as opportunities to learn to be more like Jesus, if our perspective could change so that we gain in life, what if these hard times were here to make us more self-controlled, to discipline us, to be more like Jesus, to be better husbands, better wives, better parents, better kids, better citizens, kinder people, full of grace? What if these times made us realize how important relationships are to us? What if these times simply draw us closer to God so that we might stay there instead of forgetting about God once the pain is gone? Let's not go through the pain without the gain. Let's not do that. But instead, let's look at these circumstances in our life and say, okay, God, what is it in me that needs to change? Is it my control? Is it my relationships? Is it my view of you? What is it that needs to change? Change me, because I want to be different. I want to be different. Father, this morning, we've shared, Lord, your thoughts out of the Proverbs and Job's life. We pray, Lord, that in these difficult times, as we are facing uncertainty, financial uncertainty, maybe someone's struggling with a health issue, cancer, a loss of a loved one, there's pain. Help us, Lord, to not complain, to be bitter, but help us, Lord, instead to begin to take inventory and say, Lord, what do you need to do in me? I want to be different. Change me. In Jesus' name.